Actually, James, you you said that the Lord has given me a word to speak. I would argue that the Lord has given my father a word for me to pass along to you this morning. What a week. Lots happened this week for me. My beautiful mother went to be with her Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, on Thursday morning. And if you see me cry, it's not out of deep grief. It's probably because of a lot of happiness that my mom's mind has been totally restored. And the prison that she was living in for the last 4 years, it's gone. Not only that, can you imagine what Thursday morning was like in heaven? You saw their love, how much they loved each other. And I'm really grateful for God and just the way in His timing. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this message, but don't have too much pity on me this morning. I was asked if I wanted to share, and I said I think God has a word this morning. But I do have backup plans. If I can't get through it, I'll just sit down. James and Carla will come back up, and we'll sing for a while yet. James Mast is on it, too, to come get me if I struggle too much. But there's a wide range of emotions that I'm going through this week. Today is Father's Day. It was my very first Father's Day without a father here on this earth. And I miss Dad a lot. But as I was trying to prepare a sermon this week, nothing came. And about Tuesday, I realized that God wanted me to share what I shared at my father's funeral. Some of you have heard it, but it's something we all need to hear at least one more time. I also realize that I'm uniquely qualified to bring a Father's Day message this morning because my father taught me what a good father is, but he also taught me what forgiveness is. Because the relationship that he shared with his father was not very good for a long period of time. But he was able to reconcile their differences and actually share a close relationship with his father later in life. But it wasn't just my father. My mother grew up with an alcoholic father. She suffered some very horrible abuse. And she too was able to forgive her father. And there was never even a trace of bitterness toward either of their parents. I never saw it in my entire life. In fact, I didn't even know this till probably 10 years ago. My mother and father chose forgiveness. So with that being said, I want to give you a Father's Day message that has a lot to do with my dad's passing 2 months ago, April 16th. So today's June 16th. If I mess up on dates, bear with me, because they say one of the signs of grief is you don't know what day it is. So I'm aware of that. Anyhow, I got a few things up here on the table. These are all things my father used all the time. Screwdriver, a knife, and a measuring tape. He used them a lot. In fact, I might have been able, if I would have went through all of this stuff a couple of years ago, could have supplied the whole table up here. But my father used a knife to do a lot of cutting. He would cut something away, cut to fit something, or cut something to open it. He used a screwdriver to tighten a screw, adjust a tension on a door, or fasten something. He used a measuring tape to figure out the correct size. He used it to estimate what he would need for a certain project. And his favorite use of a measuring tape was to dream about a space. You see Dad get his measuring tape out and he measures this. Man, we could put that right there. And he used it to estimate and to measure. So I want you to keep this in mind as you get your gifts today. I have a spiritual application for these instruments. The way my father used, I want to make a spiritual parallel how my father used these instruments. So I'm going to start this morning with Dad's handwritten words for his funeral service. And I quote, "My life has been abundantly blessed by God and Jesus, our risen Lord, both materially and spiritually. To God be the glory. It is not necessary to say a lot about our lives and accomplishments on this earth. My desire is that people would see Jesus, our risen Lord, and desire to follow him through our lives. Please speak to those who are still living and inspire them to put their hope and trust in the risen Lord. Thank you, family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren." I added this, all 83 of you, especially for all the happy times we enjoyed together, and remember to encourage them to be steadfast, faithful, and true to the commitment to Christ. Remind them that life is only worth living when they live for you. And that ends the quote. That's the words from my father as he prepared for his going to heaven. There's two things that really stood out to me in this quote. One was, it's not necessary to say a lot about our lives. And the second thing is, inspire them to put their hope and trust in the risen Lord. Well, Dad, I got a little issue with that. Because if you want me to inspire a group of people like yourself that knew Elvin and Ruth really well, I think I could get to them if I could talk about your life a little bit. Right? But I'll compromise, Dad. I'll just tell them how Jesus totally changed your life and how that has inspired myself, my family, to have a meaningful relationship with others. Dad accepted Christ when he was about 20 years old at a George Bronk tent revival meeting. Dad did not share a relational connection with his father probably till he was about 45. Did stuff together, but not really a relational connection. A lot of control in his family. And it was very difficult for him to work through as a young husband and a young father, as he sort of just broke away from his father's influence on his life. So my message is about what happens when Christ changes your life and you use your God-given giftings to affect the lives of others. So just three things I really want you to remember from my dad this morning. Number one, he loved his wife. Number two, he used his spiritual gifts to affect the lives of others. And number three, he was a good father. Simple, right? Got it? He loved his wife. He used his spiritual gifts to affect others. And he was a good father. I would argue he was a great father. So I want to talk about his love for his wife a little bit. 1 Peter 3:7 says, "Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered." Now, for you ladies out there that have just recoiled at the word weaker vessel, I want you to tell you a little bit about my mom. My mom was the strongest woman you'll ever see in your life. And just on Wednesday, as she was starting to get a fever, and her demented mind had taken control, my mother and I had a wrestling match for the ages. And it wasn't just a verbal one, it was a physical one. Some of you know Galen Beiler. I haven't had that big of a wrestling match since Kent tried to wrestle me, and of course lost. The grip that she had on my hand, I couldn't release my hand till I started taking individual fingers off of it. 89 years old. I would have a much easier time with the majority of the congregation. Sorry. Just caught an eye of Jason there. I might have. Yeah. But she wasn't just strong in her physical strength. She became a strong individual. So when you talk about the weaker vessel, just know that my mother was a really strong and incredible person who loved God as well. I got to say it one more time. My mother was so strong that she wasn't worried about the problems that I was going through. She had compassion on it. And I still remember the night when my mother, sitting at her sewing machine, read 5 scripture verses in the book of Romans that changed my life forever. So, weaker vessel, I think there's something lost in translation there. But there is something in this verse that's very important to fathers. It says, live with your wives in an understanding way. The times that my mom and dad argued about something that I saw, I don't remember too many. I know it was a lot less than me. Dad started dating a shy young girl who was deeply hurt by an alcoholic father. Some of you can ask about a story sometime, but she almost lost her life because of her dad. And through a lot of love, my father gave her a lot of confidence, a lot of love, and helped make her into a strong, caring, compassionate woman. These two were inseparable, and the times that were spent apart were few. The most of them were around hunting or Mennonite disaster service relief, where he would go for a week. There weren't too many times that he didn't go when there was a need. Dad took care of the hunting issue in 1988 when her family bought a cabin, and my mom started to hunt at age 60. The two of them made a lethal pair as they harvested many deer between the two of them Mom harvesting our last year at 87. Mom at 86, Dad at 87. They were business partners. Mom, I don't know how she did it because Dad was always changing things in the pig barn. And Mom approving of Dad's latest expansion project on the hog farm. There's a story of legend in her family that Dad just started farming pigs, and he sold a batch of fat hogs. And as the truck was leaving the farm that day, he had got 12 cents a pound for his pigs. And he said, Mom, I know he said that, even though it's his wife. He said, Mom, if pigs stay at 12 cents, we're going to make it. They were lovers. They loved to spend vacations together at the cabin or in a camper or in our one-room bedroom, one room, one size fits all. I think we could sleep about 24 in that bedroom. And as I remember, there was many times where there was a lot of stuff going on in that bed in their corner. Lots of laughing, giggles at night. A lot of explaining to do my kids sometimes. They catered to each other's needs almost to a fault. Dad would always take a lunch nap when we lived on the farm. It was exactly 10 minutes. He didn't need an alarm clock. He would just wake up. And then his feet would hit the ground, and he was back to work again. But before that nap time, there was another ritual was occurring. He would say something like this, "Cover my feet, Mother." The two weren't very good apart. They did things together. I mentioned hunting, cabin weekends. They did church together. They entertained guests. I was a school teacher for many years. Dad, on the area of being a good husband, I got to give you an A+. Second point, my dad used his spiritual gifts to affect others. 1 Corinthians 14:1 says, "Pursue love and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy." One of Dad's gifts was the gift of hospitality. He had the amazing ability of making you feel like he was your friend within a minute of when you met my dad. How many of you experienced feeling like you were Dad's friend the first day you met him? I know you're not lying because I've heard you talk about it. He had the amazing ability to connect across generations. As people were coming through the visitation line at his viewing, I heard this statement. It said, "Dad impacted me as a young boy selling Pioneer seed corn." And it was a young Amish man now, but he would have been a boy when Dad was selling seed. I asked, how? How did he impact you? He said he was always friendly, and I always liked when he came. And then I asked, did he give you gum? And Dad had these little chiclets in his door that he always gave wherever he went selling seed corn to the kids that would come out to the truck. And he goes, "Yeah, we got chiclets." So maybe that had something to do with his favorable relationship with my father. And at least 10 people came through that line as well. They were part of his small group over the past 35 years. And to a person, they all said that Dad was my friend and he was a mentor. I had a few people come through that interacted as my dad is with him as teenagers, and they were always referred to him as so much fun to be around. The only reason there wasn't more of them that day, they had all passed on. There was people from our community came through the line. There was at least 50 firefighters came through that day. Dad was a fire chief in the community for many years, and it wasn't unusual to wake up in the morning and there was a strange family on our living room floor. Somebody had been involved in an accident and their car was totaled and they had no place to stay that night. That was my dad. Some of those are still friends today, and up till very recently, we were still getting letters from them. My dad was a galvanizer. What that means is it's someone who could convince people that his idea or activity was the thing to do. A building plan, a more efficient idea. He just had the knack of rallying people. My brother Lynn right now is going to move off his farm, and they're building a house. And it just started. And he sent a picture, and it looks like chaos. And he said, man, I could use Dad's opinion about that. And then there was a whole bunch of chatter around that. I saw him at 84 years old rally 8 other people to play scum with him and Mom at Penn Valley. The weird part about it, it was 11 o'clock at night when he did this. And they were actually on their way to bed. The next day, a lot of you guys were asking what all the noise was about. That was my dad. Dad, in the area of using your spiritual gift, an incredible gift of hospitality, I give you an A+. My dad was a good father. Ephesians says, honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I want to put a big disclaimer in about my dad. My dad was not perfect. And each one of my siblings and myself carries some wounds, actually not wounds, scars from some of the mistakes that Dad made. But who could blame him, considering what he chose to come out of? But those scars have long been healed by his endless pursuit of forgiveness and relationship. Dad made a conscious choice to change from his experience of a controlling father to someone that cared about relationship. There's a huge difference there. Here's how he did it. My father was not absent. Dad always wanted to be involved in what we were doing. In fact, he wanted to be involved so much that in our pursuit of playing softball, he became an umpire just to be around his family. And not just to be around, but actually be involved. This created a lot of chaos, as other teams thought he was favoring our team. My personal opinion was he did a great job. After his umpiring days were over, he missed very few games as they both watched from the lawn chairs down the third base line Legend has it that he even questioned a few umpires' calls. I can count on my right hand how many times I worked after 6 o'clock as a boy. Evenings for him were meant to be enjoyed with a family. That's not how he grew up. When the sun went down, that was when you quit working. My right hand, how many times I worked after 6 o'clock. I don't know why I'm doing market. He was always with us when we went hunting. I could tell you hundreds of stories from our family hunting adventures, but I would just tell you one. It was the time I got my first buck at 14. My dad was right above me as we were doing a deer drive. I shot this deer, and we got there, and when we got to the deer, my dad was right beside me, and the deer's head was sort of under a branch, and we couldn't see horns. And he goes, "Did you shoot a doe?" And I'm like, "I think I shot a buck." Well, we pulled the branch off, and the buck that I shot was exactly those dimensions. 2 3/4 on the one side, 3 1/4 on the other. Family vacations. We never went any place expensive, not that I remember. We always did it at the family cabin. No running water, outhouse, those type of vacations. One of my favorite memories of cabin is we used to play wiffle ball as a family. And you know, as the nieces and nephews increased, they were included in those games. We had kids playing at 3 years old, and we always made a way to include everybody. But Dad would take his umpiring skills on the road with him when we go to the cabin. Couldn't really run that well anymore, so he decided to umpire. If my dad had one failure, he really couldn't tell what a foul ball was. At our cabin, if the ball went over the chimney on this side, it was fair. This side was foul. He just couldn't get it right. And it caused a lot of disagreements. In fact, we don't have that cabin anymore. We do our family vacation. That's not where I expected to cry. We do our family vacation up at my brother's place. They're not going to be there this year. And there's this tree down the third baseline, has a wide branch on it, and a lot of branches. I bet we've had 15 different rule changes over the last 20 years of what a foul ball is. I think he's failed in that area, trying to teach us what a foul ball is. Another family vacation activity was scum, the game that I hate and love. If you played scum at Penn Valley with Mom and Dad, I just want you to know something. Those games were pretty tame to the ones at the cabin. In fact, there's a lot of bitterness still left over from the young mothers who were trying to put their babies to sleep as we were playing scum. Those scars have never healed. As the moms tried to put their terrified children to sleep for the 4th time. He gave me business advice. I'm telling you things why my dad was a good father. He gave me business advice. When I bought the candy stand, he wasn't very sure what I had just done. I can understand why. What do you buy? A counter, 3 cash registers, and a few bags of candy for a lot of money. And he said to me, actually was preparing a trip to go to Florida with him and Mom. I had been married for, actually we had just come back from Grenada at that point, and I was living in their basement. And Dad told me that you'll never make a living selling candy. He knows different now. But what I wanted to say about his trip to Florida, when he got back from Florida, his garage, both sides, was full of Easter candy. And Dad wasn't that happy with the transaction that it take. I had no idea there was going to be that much candy at Easter time. I didn't know where to go with it. But my dad actually told me that you can't make a living selling candy. A year later, I still remember, he said, wow, guess you can make a living selling candy. Didn't really apologize to me. I didn't need it because he said it in the words that he said, really reaffirming. He honored his parents even though there wasn't a relational connection until much later in your life. Here's what I want you to hear about my dad. And if your father isn't like my father, you can live life without bitterness. That was my dad's whole thing. He hated when there was unsolved relationships. Like he loathed it. Do you want me to use more adjectives than that? He absolutely despised relationships that didn't work. Not the people, he hated the conflict. The grandkids and great-grandkids, this guy was an amazing grandpa. I always remember family devotions. And when we were on vacation, he would always make sure that church happened that Sunday morning. Dad, in the area of being a father, I give you an A+. I know that I'm a biased teacher, okay? I know I'm biased. But I want you to grade my dad on these verses, okay? And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. What's your grade? In closing, here's how I want you to be inspired from my father's life. My father loved people, and it changed their lives. My father used his giftings, and it changed people's lives. My father was a good father, and it changed my life and the life of my siblings forever. His life was a legacy. As a pastor, I've spoken about generational sin. Well, Dad stopped some of that generational stuff. He stopped it. It's not there anymore. Just a one person. It's not there. That's a gift my father left to us. He left it to my family, his grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. It's generational. It's a legacy of love, hospitality, and being involved in people's lives. That's the life of my father, Galen Beiler. He will never be forgotten. And as I thought what happened this week with my mother, man, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? What they're experiencing right now. I'm excited about that. So this morning, as you fathers, as you receive your gift, my dad did a lot of cutting. He cut some things out of his life that were harmful to relationships. What do you got to cut out this morning? To me, the screwdriver it tightens things, right? Maybe you need a relationship that needs tightened. That the bond between here and there is tightened. And you can restore relationship. That's what the screwdriver represents. And then this measuring tape, I want you to take a look at your life. And I want you to measure, I want you to look at the tape here and see if you measure up to what God's design is with your spiritual gifts in your life. How are you using them? How are you affecting the overall building? You know, you might just be a 20-foot piece, but it's important to the total structure. How are you measuring up to God's call in your life? My prayer is that the legacy my father left me would be your story as you relate to your wife, as you relate to your children as a father, and the people in your community.